Hello, and welcome back to Boardroom Insights with Alan O'Neill. Well, a few weeks ago, I was joined by Paco Underhill, and Paco talked about retail around the world and what's changing, and he did touch on online. And then last week, I had a chat with John Mitchell. John is the principal of a company called All Human, who specialize in AI and digital marketing. And it got me thinking and reflecting on AI. And of course, I'm not a techie guy, but it's more about how do organizations embrace AI and what do they need to watch out for? And to me, the critical thing here is culture and how organizations adapt their culture to embrace AI and the reality of our changing world. So today, I'm going to just reflect back on some of the things that John talked about, but also show the link between that culture and leadership, and of course, where strategy fits in too, in terms of putting plans together for AI. Now, when I think about John, a number of things stood out for me that I think are really pertinent, and for anybody that is running an e-commerce business, as part of the business or as the main business, there are some watchouts. One of them was the search features that heretofore organizations or the consumers use Google to search, or they might use Instagram and Facebook, etc. But now that's shifting. OpenAI, as an example, which is ChatGPT, they are also a search engine. And the news from John is that Stripe and OpenAI are collaborating in the background to explore how they can work together. What does that suggest? Well, it suggests some sort of commercial involvement where consumers will be able to search online. And remember how OpenAI gives you its information. It scrapes the internet and it goes through all of the websites that are out there to very quickly pull together its edit as an answer to your question. Now, for e-commerce businesses, that's very serious, because what does that mean for the future of websites? Because obviously it's going to mean that we need to have more narrative in the product descriptions and focus more on benefits, not just features. So it's a complete rethink of websites. It's already there, by the way. I mean, when consumers go searching, and if they use OpenAI, ChatGPT to do that, they're already being curated by OpenAI in whatever way their algorithms work. So that's a serious watch out. So it does mean that the AI is already here and your consumers are using it, and you've got to be ready with your website to adapt. Another point coming out of John's chat was that the early movers aren't always the biggest. In other words, there are small companies out there who are really, really being innovative and making inroads, even though they're small, because they're just being clever. They are adaptable, flexible, innovative, and they're making inroads quite quickly. So it's not only the big guys with big budgets that are doing that, you can also have small companies that are making fast and great advances. And the point about websites, well, they're not dying, as John said, but it does mean we have to reconfigure how we think about our websites and how we, the pictures, the metadata, and all of the narratives, as I said already. But all of those technical things are not my expertise, so I'm not going to pretend that I can give you advice on how to do that. There's lots of other companies who specialize in that, All Human just being one example. But for me, where I come into this whole debate is around culture. Because if the culture isn't right, if the organization is not focused on how it can adapt to the new realities, whether it's AI or whether it's some other new system, by the way, to me, it's all about culture. I see culture, you'll have heard me saying this before, it's the golden thread that weaves its way throughout every part of an organization. It impacts on the choices that you make. It impacts on how you formulate your strategy. It impacts on how your people behave. It impacts on your level of willingness to be innovative, to be daring, to trial things, to pilot things. All of that is stitched together by the golden thread. Your golden thread, in your case, is your unique culture. Now, AI is not replacing that thread. AI is pulling at it. It's really tugging at that golden thread, and it's in danger of breaking it in places for you if you don't see through it and recognize its role. What I'm getting at here with culture is beliefs drive behaviors. And behaviors then, of course, as you know, they drive the business outcomes. And I've said this so many times about culture, that the culture is the foundational part of an organization. That if you don't get that right, if you don't get that consistent, if you don't get a defined culture in your organization, well, one will form anyway, and it mightn't be the right one. You get differences and inconsistency throughout your business. Now, if leaders believe that culture is the system, well, then behaviors will shift. You'll get much more cohesion and much more consistency. From my research, in particular around strategy, I want to tell you about these are the banana skins that companies fall into all the time. And remember, if you're trying to adapt AI into your business, that needs a strategy. But keep in mind the things that go wrong with strategy all of the time. And in no particular order, but if any one of these is missing, it has a trickle, an impact on all of the others as well. And they are as follows. One, poor choices. If the choices that you make are not grounded in macro environmental awareness and what's going on in the outside world, what's available out there, what are the opportunities and what are the threats, you'll miss a trick in your decision making. Another banana skin is the misalignment that I see at the top tier level in an organization, where you have organizations, particularly the bigger ones, where you might have, well, let's say the marketing is doing its thing and operations doing its thing in a vertical, HR doing a different thing in a vertical, and finance doing its thing. Now, that might sound a little bit extreme, but it's not extreme. I seriously come across that all the time. It's not through bad intentions. In fact, it's the opposite. It's through best intentions. That in those larger organizations, you have owners, you've got C-level executives who have ultimate responsibility for their particular domain, marketing, operations, commercial, whatever it might be. And they feel under pressure to do things and to get things done. And all of the projects that they're working on might well be fantastic projects, but unless they're talking to each other, and I'm seeing this time after time, that these individual projects, if they're not talking to each other, and if they're not interlinked and also being respectful of each other, they're going to fall apart. Another flaw in strategy making is the inability of some companies to go and bring it to the front line. What I'm getting at here is this. Some organizations, and particularly this time of the year, end of the year, you'll get organizations who take time out to put their business plans together for the following year. And that's great. Some of them just do budgets, by the way, but that's another conversation. But even for the ones who do build out their plan around the budgets, they fail to recognize that the next level down detail has also got to be built out. So that then, therefore, the people in the warehouse, on the shop floor, and the driving the trucks, they know what they've got to do and what their part is in the overall plan. So that failure to cascade the macro master plan for the organization down into the detail for each individual department is another banana skin that I see regularly. Another banana skin is the inability to monitor progress. So once the strategy is done, some people feel, oh, thankfully, that's done. That's a job done now. We can tick the box on that. Well, that's only starting. That's getting into the starting blocks. That's a piece of paper, a document that outlines all the things that need to happen in order to deliver on your KPIs. But if that plan isn't monitored throughout the year and the years to come, if it's not tracked effectively with good governance, with proper involvement of the right people looking at where are they at against their plan, and when things slip, as they inevitably will, how they're taking corrective action to get them back on track. And then also change fatigue. If there's too much going on, that can have an impact on how people feel, their emotional well-being. That if people feel there's so much change going on, that if that's not presented to them in a cohesive way that shows the fit with the organization, they will then otherwise feel there's lots of initiatives going on. Undoubtedly, strategy involves some change, but you have to make sure that you communicate this in a way that wins over hearts and minds, and that's critical. If you don't win hearts and minds in the development and the execution of your strategy, it just won't come together for you. And that, again, is back to culture. And where I fits into all of that is it's part of the strategy. When you're shaping up your strategy. AI will play a part in there, but you've got to make sure that people understand and also don't worry about it, because AI, there's lots of scaremongering about it taking over jobs and so on. But you've got to make sure you include that in your strategy and communicate it effectively. Now, they're the main points I wanted to convey from John's interview. Like I said, it's well worth going back and having a listen to hear what he's telling us about the real challenges around AI, particularly for e-commerce retailers. But we shouldn't be scared and put off by this. Yes, it is change, and change management is not easy. And we as leaders have a role to play in leading through that change and recognizing the emotional turmoil around change, not just the processes that are a result of the change. And too many leaders make that mistake of just focusing on the practical element of the change. But remember, change management, you've got to just work on the human element, the emotions, because people, there is a natural tendency to resist change, and we want to try and avoid that as best we can. How? By inclusion, by including people at the right time. That doesn't mean we're trying to turn everything into a democracy. Leaders have got to lead. I get all that. But when the time comes that we need to get our people to embrace something that's different or to do something that's different, if you don't involve them early on, you're missing a trick. You're missing a serious trick. Now, to me, the key thing here is when embracing AI, use the 4D model for change management. The first D is discovery. So get a handle on, well, okay, where can you use AI effectively in your business, whether it's e-commerce or any part of the business? Where can you use AI effectively? And then who's it going to involve? Who are the stakeholders that should be considered as you do that first piece of discovery? What's the gap between where you are today, where you want to be with this AI, and then just consider the implications, the obstacles you might face, and don't forget the people element in that. The second D of change management is design. And that's where you now design a solution, some sort of an intervention, where in this case, we're talking about AI. So design a program, a strategy around including and using that AI. And that again will involve recognizing the impact on those key people that will be impacted, both internally and externally, don't forget, because AI does have connotations for your customers too. And identify what training will be required in preparing yourself for that, which leads you on to the third D, which is deliver. And deliver means deliver. In other words, install or initiate or set up or get rocking and rolling with that new strategy around AI. And in this case here, you've got to be so closely focused on watching and checking in and monitoring and talking and communicating. They're the key elements of deliver, because you're including people and you're watching out for how they're responding, how they're embracing. The fourth D is develop for the long term. And this is where you now need to bed in the change rather than allowing anybody roll backwards and start just saying, okay, looking at it as a pilot and pretending or thinking that it's not here for the long term. Well, of course, if you've decided as part of your strategy that it is here for the long term, you've got to make sure that people don't roll back from that. So in summary, the 4 Ds of change will work for you here in terms of introducing AI, discover, find the gap analysis, design a plan that doesn't just look at the process, the technical process and the systems, but also the human element, the emotions of how people will respond. The third D is deliver. Yes, that's where you get cracking, get rolling out the initiative, but you got to monitor very closely, communicate and watch. And then the fourth D is develop for the long term, where you're now embedding the change and institutionalizing it effectively so that it doesn't roll backwards. And that's pretty much all I want to say. Look, strategy still decides the race here. So in conclusion, what I want to say is your embodiment of AI is not just a technical system or process issue. It has to focus on the human element. Don't forget, that's culture effectively deeply embedded in the business, where everything else happens because your culture either supports it or it doesn't support it. So let's leave it there for now. I want you just to reflect, have a listen back to John's episode. It's well worth a listen to. It links back to a previous episode with Paco Underhill, where we talked about retail. But if you are an e-commerce platform, you need to think differently. But the points I'm making are not just for e-commerce platforms. The whole concept around embracing AI is cultural, beginning and end. If you don't recognize that and embrace it, you're missing a trick. That's it from me. Thanks for listening, and I wish you well with your AI plans, and see you soon. Take care. Most businesses aren't failing because of bad ideas. They're stuck because great ideas aren't landing for them. The culture says one thing, the strategy says another, and the customer is caught in the middle. That's why I created the 7 Steps to Profit, a practical business framework to solve that. It's not another off-the-shelf solution. It's a proven transformation framework that joins the dots across culture, strategy, leadership, customer, and execution, with the tools and structure to make it stick. Our support is also enhanced by our own organization health assessment to give you clarity on what you need to work on. If you're ready for real alignment, measurable progress, and execution discipline, visit 7stepstoprofit.com. That's the number 7. 7stepstoprofit.com and book your no strings discovery call.